All right, well, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on this webinar, the 24-25 FAFSA Form preview presentation. As most of you know, the FAFSA for this year is not yet up and running, but it is going to about be ready by December 31st. It's supposed to be up and running, at least what they have called a soft launch now. And so we're going to go through the form a little bit on what we think it's going to look like with some screenshots and also some helpful tips and hints to be able to help you in filling out this financial aid form. My name is Eric Danielson with the Iowa College Access Network. I've been with ICAN actually now for over 25 years, and this is definitely the biggest changes that have ever taken place within the FAFSA form itself. With what they've said actually in the last 40 years, the biggest changes. So I want to go through some of those changes with you and what it's going to look like for you in filling out the form this year. First of all, though, I want to thank all of our FAFSA Step-by-Step partners, Iowa College Aid, a state agency here that administers state of Iowa aid, IASFA, the Iowa Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. We have some financial aid experts from IASFA that are going to be monitoring the chat, answering your questions. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then us at ICAN, the Iowa College Access Network, a nonprofit organization that helps students and families through this career college planning and what we're going to be talking about tonight, financial aid and FAFSA specifically process. This is our number at ICAN and website if you'd like to set up an appointment with us and getting help in filling out the form when the time comes. I will tell you right now that we are very booked for our first 2 or 3 weeks into January. There might be a few at the end, and we have February open as well. One of the things that we've heard about in the last couple of days is that the FAFSA form is going to be, again, what they call a soft launch form, and they're really anticipating maybe having some issues when it first goes out there on December 31st. And one of the things that they've mentioned to students and families within this website, or having us do it, is that you don't have to get it done right away. Different colleges will have different priority dates to get this information in, and I know at least 3 right now. The Regent universities are going to want it in by February 1, but that doesn't mean you have to do it on January 1 if there are any issues. So they've been encouraging some students and families maybe to wait a few days, even a week, before end up filling it out. We've got some appointments early on when we get back from winter break on January 3rd, and we're hoping that it works that day, but we are anticipating some glitches that are going to take place when they launch this with the major changes. Now tonight, the way we're going to do this webinar is I'm going to go through it step by step with you, and again, point out problem areas that arise and what it's going to look like, just to give you a little bit of a feel. Quite honestly, these slides are not totally official. I think there are some that are going to be missing right now, depending on certain situations that we haven't seen yet. But for the most part, these are slides that have been shared to us in the financial aid community to give us at least a real good idea on what the 24-25 FAFSA form is going to look like. Now, our step-by-step volunteers that we have tonight have many years of experience within the financial aid process. Tim Bakula from the University of Northern Iowa, Sarah Freestone at Iowa State University, Andrew Bremmeyer from the University of Iowa, Kylie Klamas from Southwestern Community College, Matt Faldudo, Kirkwood Community College, and Mary Phipps from Grinnell College. So these are the folks that, as I'm going through this, are going to be answering the questions within the chat box. And just to kind of practice within that chat box, within there, I'm just curious right now, would you let us know, those of you that are attending here right now, what high school city that you're from? Just real quick, wanted to get an idea on the chat box if you'll utilize that and pop that in. We've got Solon, Waukon, Mount Vernon, Clarinda, Waukee, Urbandale, Hinton, Iowa. We're covered. West Des Moines, North Liberty, Waukee, North English, North Liberty, Waukee, Logan. I mean, we're talking, we've got Eastern Iowa, Central Iowa, and Western Iowa then covered. That's great. Thank you. I just wanted to, again, to practice with that and to utilize, this is, again, the chat box is what we're going to utilize for the questions. So please feel free as we're going along, any questions you have, put those in the chat box, and our FAFSA step-by-step expert volunteers will answer those questions for you as I go through this. So beyond that, I think we're ready to go ahead and to get started. First thing that I want to mention before we actually get into the FAFSA form, I wanted to talk about the FSA ID. The name of this may change over a period of time. I think they're going to go to, say, studentaid.gov account, which is where you would go to create your FSA ID, same place that you fill out the FAFSA form at studentaid.gov. But what we want to emphasize with the FSA ID, which has been around about 10 years now, everyone's going to need an FSA ID to access the form. That hasn't always been the case in the past, but for the 2425 form, you're going to need to have an FSA ID to access the form. So you don't have to wait. If you've not created your FSA IDs yet, go to studentaid.gov tonight and create those FSA IDs. Now, when we say that everyone's going to need one, not only the student, but if the student is dependent, which the majority of you, I'm assuming, are dependent students or parents of dependent students, this might mean now that multiple parents may need an FSA ID as well. In the past, in a 1 or 2 parent household, and I will talk about who the parents are going to be needing to be on this form a little bit later. But if it's a one parent household, it's only one parent that needs the FSA ID. But in a 2-parent household, in the past, it's still only one that's needed it. If you filed a joint tax return in 2022, that is the tax year that's going to be asked on this 2425 FAFSA form. If you filed a joint tax return in 22, then only one parent's going to need an FSA ID. But if there are 2 parent contributors on the form and they did not file a joint tax return in 22, then both of you now are going to need to get FSA IDs as parent contributors. And so if one already has one but the other doesn't, make sure the other one goes ahead and gets that. Because the FSA ID, to ultimately be able to fill out the form, you're going to need not only to have got an FSA ID and registered for one at studentaid.gov, but now it's going to need to be verified and confirmed with the Social Security Administration prior to accessing that. And that can take up to 7 or 10 days. So that's why we want you to do that right now, if you haven't already, in getting ready to fill out the form, more than likely in sometime in the new year. Another thing that we wanted to mention that actually started in July of 22 was the FSA ID. Anybody that logs in to studentaid.gov with their FSA ID is going to be multi-factor authenticated. In other words, send a 6-digit code, either text to them or emailed to them, and they put in that code just as, again, as that multi-factor authentication. So this is going to happen now. The way the FAFSA, or excuse me, yes, the way the FAFSA form is going to be completed for 2425, there are going to be different roles. Student will have their role as a contributor, and the parents will have their roles, and each of you will log into studentaid.gov to complete your sections. Each time you log in, you're going to be multi-factor authenticated, and that's why we want to say students and parents, or spouses, if the student was married, are going to need to be in contact or together to totally get the FAFSA form done in one setting. Also wanted to mention, parents without Social Security numbers will be able to apply for an FSA ID. It's just not up and running yet. It will be, or supposed to be, up and running when the FAFSA is out by December 31st, coming up here real soon. But this is not available yet. Like those of you, if you have a Social Security number, you can get an FSA ID at this time. For those that don't have a Social Security number, when you try to create an account at FSA ID, it'll ask you if you have one. You'll say no, and then it's going to ask some questions that would have been through really a credit check through TransUnion Credit Bureau. Questions like, which one of these, multiple choice questions, which one of these was an address for you in the past, or a phone number, questions like that. You only have one try to be able to answer those. And if you do not answer or are able to answer them correctly, then you're going to have to call 1-800-4FED-AID, 1-800-4FED-AID, to be able to go through a process to send in documents to federal student aid to verify identity, like a driver's license, state ID, foreign passport. They'll let you know the specifics on that. There is no longer going to be a process to sign a signature page that is being retired. So it's definitely important for everyone to get an FSA ID. Unfortunately, for those that might be parents without Social Security numbers right now, you're going to have to wait until the FAFSA form is out there before you can start that process. Now, what we want to do is to give you an example tonight of a dependent student. in starting to fill out the form that will end up inviting parents on the form as well. And so got a lot of slides to go with you. Some I'll go through quicker than others. This is a new process really for us all. It's not looked like this before for any of us at ICAN or in the financial aid community. So there might be some slides I just read some instructions on, but let's go ahead, keep those questions coming in the chat box to our financial aid experts, and we're going to start through the form. Now, when you go to studentaid.gov, this is what the landing page is going to look like. And for those of you beginning for the first time, if you're a high school senior, you're going to start a new form. If you've already got and edited an existing form, you would click on that. But the first time that you do it, you're going to click on starting a new form. Once you click on starting a new form, then it's going to ask you to log in with your FSA ID, username, and password that you created. If you haven't, then you see in the top right-hand corner is a place to create an account. But if you've already got your FSA ID, you're going to click enter in the information, email, phone, or the username and the password, and then click log in, and it'll send you a 6-digit code or ask you which way you want to receive it. 6-digit code, either text if you've got a cell phone in there, or by email. I don't have any slides on this or showing that, but once you are able to enter in that 6-digit code to verify your identity there, then it's going to go on and start into the FAFSA Form 2425 welcoming you. First thing it's going to ask when you're starting the form, are you the student or the parent? For our example here, we're going to say student, but we do want to let you know that parents could actually start their portion of it for their student as well. Quite honestly, at ICAN, we're kind of wondering what might be best way to start it. Federal Student Aid has said they'd like to see the student start, but I think we're going to try it both ways and just see what works best for us in appointments with the students and families we work with initially. But for our example here, we click on the student, and then it does a little bit of onboarding. The first part of the onboarding gets into what is the FAFSA form and has a video there in case anyone still wants to watch it. The second part of the onboarding provides information about different roles that may be required to participate, and explaining that a little bit more, which is information we're going to talk about tonight. And the first thing that I do want to get into to break away is to talk about who is going to be considered a parent on the FAFSA form for a dependent student. If both legal parents are married, then it's both parents' information that's going to be included on the FAFSA form. And if those parents filed a joint tax return in 22, only one parent's going to need an FSA ID then. If those married parents, though, filed separate tax returns in 22, then both of them would need to get an FSA ID. Now, if legal parents are unmarried but living together, we're still going to answer questions then about both of those parents. This would be an example, though, if they're unmarried, they wouldn't have filed a joint tax return in 22. And so that is one situation we know for sure where both those parents would need to each get FSA IDs. If a parent is widowed or single, we're only going to answer questions about that parent, and only that parent will need an FSA ID, unless the widowed parent would be remarried as of the day we're filling out the form. They might just get remarried today. If you go and fill out the FAFSA form on December 31st, we would need both that parent and step-parent information. Even though they weren't remarried in 22, the form asks as of today. And if you're remarried as of today, then that parent and step-parent's information would need to go on the FAFSA form. The big one we always need to address is when parents are divorced or separated. If parents are divorced or separated, then we answer questions about the parent that provided the most financial support in the last 12 months. If that would be mom, and mom is not remarried, then it's only mom's information that's going to go on the FAFSA form. Just she would need an FSA ID. If mom, though, would be remarried as of today, then we would need mom and step-parent information to go on the FAFSA form, again, even if they weren't remarried during the tax year that's being asked about. And if they did not file joint tax returns in 22, then both mom and the step-parent each would need to have FSA IDs and complete their sections of the FAFSA form. Any questions on who's considered a parent? Again, please ask the chat box, and our financial aid experts will answer those questions for you. Another onboarding will be what comes up next, what to expect after this, and what it's going to take in filling out the form, which I'm actually going to be talking with you about today. And then a little bit of onboarding about after you submit the form what to do. And again, that's another area that I'll talk about a little bit later towards the end. The very first part then, after doing the onboarding, is they want the student to verify their personal information is correct. Now on this page right here, this is not something you could go in and make a correction on within the FAFSA form. For your name, date of birth, social security number, email address, or mobile phone, you would actually go to the account settings at the studentaid.gov website, and that's where you would need to make the corrections on there. Account settings on studentaid.gov for any of this information. Because if you needed to change an email or mobile phone, then they'd have to re-verify you, sending you a 6-digit code and getting that set up. And that other information they would need to do as well. So just verify this. Hopefully it is all correct, but if not, you must go to the account settings at studentaid.gov. Now, for dependent student identity information continued on here, this is something that could be changed, and that gets into the permanent mailing address. If that's correct, you would just hit continue, but if any changes need to be made, you could do that within this setting here. Then it's going to ask about state of legal residence, where your state of legal residence is at and when you became a legal resident. If you're a student from Iowa that you were born here, I would just put the month and year that you were born then when you became a legal resident with here in Iowa. But if that would be different, it allows you to put whenever it is that you move to here. The next part, the student's going to provide consent. This year, this C word is something to become familiar with in providing consent. The student's going to need to give consent to have their federal tax information transferred directly into the FAFSA from the IRS to complete their student financial section. So what you would do is, and a lot of this is just letting you know some legalese, 2 pages of screenshots worth, but basically you would go down and just hit approve. For a student to get financial aid, the student and any parent contributors must hit approve and give consent to have their tax information brought in directly from the IRS. Now, there might be some students who didn't file in 2022, and if that's the case, this is still a process that you do. When they look and see to give consent to try to transfer it over and see that you haven't filed, it'll let the FAFSA form know that. But no matter whether you filed taxes or not, this is something that every contributor on the FAFSA form, student and parent, will need to give consent for a student to be able to get financial aid. So you hit approve, and then you would move on. Next, we get into what's called personal circumstance questions here. Gives an overview at first, but these are going to be questions that determine whether a student is dependent or independent from the family. First, they ask about marital status, and if they're still single, that's one way they're still going to be dependent. I think for the majority of parents and students that are watching this right now, they're probably going to hit single like we're doing with our example here and hit continue. Then it's going to ask about their college and career plans. And this gets into your grade level within college. We want you to try to come as close as possible to what you think it is, depending on the credits. If you're a high school senior, even if you've got college credit ahead of time, please put first year freshman down on there. It'll ask them if they're going to have their bachelor's degree before 24-25 school year. The majority of you, I realize that's going to be no, like our example here, and then we would hit continue. Also, there are going to be then next more questions, student personal circumstances. Real quickly, if the student is one of these things, they would be considered independent. Most high school seniors are not going to be any of these things and are still going to be considered dependent, but there can be a couple that occasionally high school seniors will be. Now, the questions directed to the students are looking at the students currently serving on active duty in the armed forces. The student is a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. The student has children who live with them and receive more than half their support from them, not only now, but also between July 1 of 2024 and June 30th of 25. At any time since the student turned 13, were they an orphan, no living or biological or adoptive parent? At any time since the student turned 13, they were awarded the court. At any time since the student turned 13, they were in foster care. The student is or was an legally emancipated minor as determined by a court, or the student was or is in a legal guardianship with someone other than a parent or step parent determined by a court in their state of residence. Now, again, most high school seniors, and a lot of times students that went into college right away, are going to say none of these apply. If any would apply, you would click on that box and that would make a student an independent student. The foster care, the ward of dependent of the court, the legal guardianship, those are three that we see a little bit more of that a high school senior might be. When we hit continue, there's one other question that we see a little bit of too, and that is on at any time on or after July 1 of 2023, was the student an unaccompanied youth, homeless, or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? If that's no, we would move on, and again, they're dependent. If it's yes, then they would put down who might have designated them: homeless liaison, trio director, an emergency shelter, and that would make them an independent student. Again, for our purposes today, though, we are going to still select no and then hit continue to move on. Now, this does give kind of a little explanation on, even though the student answered no, sometimes students will have some unusual circumstances. On this screenshot, it gives some of those extreme examples: left home due to an abusive environment, been abandoned, granted refugee or asylum status, victim of human trafficking, other things that are listed on their extreme case. Now, if that's yes, then they're going to give directions on checking with your financial aid offices of any colleges that you're looking at to have them help determine whether or not the student has an unusual circumstance. But if the answer is no on these and we hit continue, again, that means the student's dependent, and eventually they're going to need to put in parent information. Now, if any student has trouble in getting information that they're unwilling to provide that, then the only thing that the student may be eligible for is a direct unsubsidized loan. Hopefully, all of you dependent students will just answer no to this question and move on, since the parents won't be unwilling, and then we'll continue on in the sections. But that is, again, a question now that they're putting on that hasn't always been there in the past. Next thing they're going to do is have the students tell about their parents. Are their parents married? Yes or no? Our example on here is going to be yes, and we'll hit continue. And then they're going to have the students invite the parents to the FAFSA form. This is where the students ask to enter personal information about the parents in order to send them an invite to do the form. Now, I will tell you that the parents don't have to have this invite or the email invite that'll come to them to complete their section on the FAFSA form for the student. But when you start with the student information on here, this is a process that you'll need to go through. If you start with the student, this is still a case where I know we're going to need the parents available to be able to give their first name, last name, date of birth, and social security number, as well as email address. And that first name, last name, date of birth, and social security number, that needs to match with what's on a parent's FSA ID that they would have created. The email doesn't necessarily need to match on there, but the other information will, for them to be able to get this invite and be able to do their section of the FAFSA form eventually, that we are going to show a little bit later. So double check, make sure all that information is correct, but this is one part even within the student section of a dependent student that the parents are more likely going to need to help out with. Once we hit continue, now we're going to get into student demographic information. It's going to ask about their gender. Now, none of these are going to affect the student's eligibility for federal aid, be used in any calculations, or be shared even with the schools that the student applies to. They're not going to be shared with that. So you can answer the questions, prefer not to answer, whatever you do on here. But once these questions are answered, hit continue. Student race, ethnicity questions as well, same thing. None of this is going to go to any eligibility calculations or be shared with the schools that you put down on the FAFSA form. Race, then another question that is on there, and hit continue. And next, then we're going to get into student citizenship status. Now, U.S. citizen or national, click on that, move on. If you click on eligible non-citizen, and what it means by eligible non-citizen would be someone that is here with a permanent resident card or conditional green card. Or that's one of the major ones, I-94 form. And they're going to have a social security number as well as an alien registration number, which is something that they would ask for. If you clicked on eligible non-citizen, they would ask for that 8-9-digit number in the next question. Now, if neither a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, if you're not, then I would say you're probably not going to fill out the FAFSA form. About the only way that you would be if any college would ask for it specifically to give their institutional aid. But if you are not a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, Eligible non-citizens would include those here on visas, would be one example. Students involved in the DACA program would not be considered eligible non-citizens to get federal aid or even state of Iowa aid as of now. So I would only fill this form out if you were clicking on that box if a college was asking for it. And at least as of right now, we don't know of any in the state of Iowa that would be asking for a FAFSA form from those that are not a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. For our example here, though, we're going to put U.S. citizen or national and click continue. Ask about parents' education status. Did either attend college? Yes, no, don't know. Click, hit on that, hit continue. And then a question if a parent was killed in the line of duty. So if that's no, for our example, we're moving on. But if yes, that'll just notify them. There could be some aid out there for students that are able to answer yes to this question. Dependent high school completion status, high school diploma, like a GED, homeschooled, asking about your completion status, what it'll be at the beginning of the 24-25 school year. So high school seniors, we're anticipating if you're graduating with a high school diploma that you will get that done by next May, and go ahead and list that down. But it is completion status that you going to have at the beginning of the 24-25 college year. We hit continue, and then it's going to ask if you're a high school grad, what high school you're graduating from. What I would encourage you to do is put in your state, city, and the name of the high school, and then click the search function. What will happen then, as you see on the second screenshot here, is that there'll be a list of schools. Click on your right one, and then hit continue. Sometimes some of your schools will be exactly what you think. Others of your schools you might not realize, but they have like senior within the name. I know at Norwalk, it put in Norwalk High School. On the FAFSA form, it's actually Norwalk Senior High School. We'd like to try to get that exact, so I would encourage you to use the search function to find your high school. Click on that box and then hit continue on. It'll give you another screen just to confirm that that's the right one, and if it is, then you'll hit continue. If not, you would go back to the previous button and try to find the right one for you. After we put in the high school, now it's the dependent student financials. A lot of your information was brought over directly from the IRS, but when we hit continue, there are a couple of questions that won't be. And if you did file taxes in 22, then this is one reason why we would like to make sure at any appointment that we had that you had your taxes with you. One is the amount of college grant scholarships or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income on the IRS. Now, most of you are not going to have any of this, and it's going to be zero. Occasionally, we do see some students who've gotten in excess of grant scholarships or benefits more than the cost of attendance at the college, and they have to report that on their tax forms. They can be taxed for that, but anything that you did have on your taxes, they want you to list it down on here on the form to kind of take out of the calculation. Another question, foreign earned income exclusion. That you would need to look up on the taxes as well. Again, majority of students are going to have zero for all these questions. We're very rarely going to see any of this, but they are questions that are going to be asked. If they are zero, leave them as zero and hit continue. Then we're going to get into student asset questions. The first one, current total of cash savings and checking. So basically, the day you're filling out the form, what do you currently have in cash savings and checking? The next question is about net worth of business or investment farm, and then current net worth of investments. Now, these are things that I'm going to talk about in just a bit when we get to the parent side, because they usually apply more to that. If a student would have any kind of, though, business or investment farm happen to be in their name, they would need to list that down, net worth value minus debt. Any investments, if they have any trust funds in their name, or they do have some stocks or CDs, bonds given to them, they would need to include that for investment down on here as well and list that. Again, I will go over a little bit more and have another list once I get to the parent side, because it does seem to apply more to the parents than it does the students. Once the student asset questions are answered, we hit continue, and now we're going to put down the colleges that you want to have receive these results as a student. Whether 1, 2, 3, 4, or up to 20 is actually what you can be able to put down. So if you have already the search the school code for the college, then you can click on that. Probably the majority of you are not going to have all the codes, so you can search by school name. And you considering searching by school name, once you find that name, you'll click on the school that you want and to have them included. Again, now this year, up to 20 colleges and universities is what you can put down on the FAFSA form to get the results. Once you have listed the colleges down, it will give you a preview of it just to make sure. You can either remove some if you want, view any info about this colleges that are on there. But once you have your list set and then hit continue, now we're about done. We're on the student review page part. So the personal identifiers, the personal circumstances, demographics, financials, colleges. Last thing is going to be a signature. If you want to look at any of those section by sections just to make sure you got everything correctly, you're able to go in there and to do that by hitting the expand all. To edit a response, the student can select the question's hyperlink, and it's going to take you to that corresponding page to make that correction. And since the student did invite a parent into the form, they can see the parent contributor section and the status of the parent's invite on that as well. Just to give you an example of that, the parent contributor section, they can let you know that the invite has been sent. Now, last thing we're going to need to do for the student part to be done is the student signature. So on this page, the student's going to acknowledge the term and conditions of the FAFSA and sign their section. After do that, then they're going to hit it. Now, since we haven't done the parent information yet, the form's not considered complete and is not going to be able to be processed. But they're going to sign the form, hit submit, and then upon signing it, they're going to be presented the student section complete page. It's not a total confirmation page because not everything is in yet, but they're going to show this. And then in this next scenario that the student invited, what we're going to get into is what it looks like in completing the parent section. But this gives an idea, at least you know, the student section is complete. And giving some ideas on what to do next, which we'll go over a little bit more at the end as well. Now, since we've got the student completed, let's say you're with the parent and the parent gets into their email. Now, again, this isn't a view in studentaid.gov right now, but this is what give you an idea on what the email is going to look like that's being sent. It's really not a link, though, that you have to use within the email to start this portion of it. Basically, as a parent, you're going to go to studentaid.gov and log in under into this part with your FSA ID, just like we did with the student. Studentaid.gov, you're going to log in. If you've already got an FSA ID, put in your email and password. When you hit login, they will send you a 6-digit code to verify your information as well. This is where the parents are going to now be two-step verified too. In the past, it's generally the two-step verification in the last couple of years happened to whoever we initially logged in with on the form on studentaid.gov. Could have been the parent, could have been the student. Now that each contributor is going to have to go into studentaid.gov and fill out their own section, each of you are going to be two-step verified. So whether it's at a FAFSA event or appointments, we want to make sure to point out that to get everything done, we are going to need both the student and parent contributors accessible at least and around to be able to complete all the sections and get the whole form done. Again, since each of you are going to be two-step verified each time you log in with your FSA ID. Now, when the parent logs in, when the student had already completed it, you're going to come to a My Activity page, and it's going to see the invitation. You've been requested as a contributor, and you can click on there to go ahead and get started. Since studentaid.gov is more information than just the FAFSA that is on there, there could be other things that are listed as well, and they're just kind of showing that down below here. But basically, you're to complete the FAFSA form, if the student's already done their part and invited you, you're going to log in as the parent and then click Get Started to do your portion of the FAFSA form for them. What it's going to start out with is just giving you a little bit of information on what's going to take place on here and frequently asked questions if you ever need to take a look at it. They're also going to do the same onboarding that they did for the students. What is the FAFSA form? Contributors to the FAFSA form and explaining that to you as well. What to expect on the form and the type of questions, and then what to expect after submitting the FAFSA form too. So same onboarding that happened for the students too. Parents, when you log in, they're also going to ask to start with your identity information. If you would need to change any of this information on this page, you must access again your account settings on studenta.gov to change it and then jump back into the FAFSA form again. These questions cannot be changed within the FAFSA form itself. They're going to double check your address too. This would be a screen to where you could make the changes on here if need be, but I'm going to get into the address, click continue. And now as parents, you're going to give consent for your federal taxes to be transferred directly over to the FAFSA form. If you did not file taxes, again, it will tell the form that you still must give consent, but want to mention it one more time. Everybody on a FAFSA form, every contributor must give consent to have their taxes brought over by the IRS, or the student is not going to be eligible for federal aid. That is something that must be done. I will tell you that if consent isn't given right away and parent completes a part, or even the student, you are able to go back in and give consent later. So sometimes I think this year it could even be accidentally maybe somehow skipped over. It's going to be a new year. Things are going to go a little bit wonky, I think, at first. So if that happens, just know that consent can be go back in and given later if need be. But we want every student and parent contributor to do it initially here and hit approve and move on. Next thing it's going to get into with the parents, when you started with the student information already, parent demographic form. You hit continue. It's going to ask about their current marital status on here. For example, here we've got married. Click continue. Then their parents are going to be asked about their state of legal residence as well, and when they became a legal resident. Parents, if you were born in Iowa and you've always been here, that would be the same thing for you, just putting the month and year of your birth, if that was the case. We click continue, and now we're going to get into the parents' financial information. It's going to ask if anyone has received any federal benefits or if none apply. Getting into housing assistance, free or reduced lunch, Medicaid, SNAP, or food stamps on there. If anything has been received in 22 or 23 by anyone within the household, you would click on that box. If none apply, then you would click on the none apply box that is there and hit continue. It's going to ask about filing status. Did or will parent file a 22 joint tax return with their current spouse? If that's yes, then again, only one of you is going to need an FSA ID. If that's no, then this is just going to be information about that one parent. And the second parent contributor, if there's two, would need to log in and do their portion of it, of the FAFSA, and answer all these questions as well. For our example here today, we're going to do it as if these married parents did file a joint return. So you're only going to have to go through this once and just one parent needing, again, the FSA ID. We hit continue, and then it's family size. This page asks if the family size has changed. Your family size is going to be determined by how many exemptions that you had on your 22 taxes. That's what's going to be automatically brought over. But this is a question that allows you to change it just in case it needs to be changed. For those of you that are in divorced or separated situations, the family size a lot of times compared to what your exemptions were in 22 is going to be different. So it will ask you to update that information on here by already they're counting the family size of the parent, the other parent, and the student, we know in this situation, but then enter the number of children or other dependents who live with the parent that is going to receive more than half their support from them. So between July 1 of 2024 and June 30th of 2025. So this is a place where that family size can be updated, and it's important to make sure to do that if it needs to be changed compared to the number of exemptions that you had in 22. There is now still going to be a question about number in the college. How many in the parent's family, excluding parents, will be in college? Now this year, that's no longer going to be taken into account for the calculation to determine what they feel you could contribute as a family. but it's still a question here on the form. If that's just the student themselves that is filling out the FAFSA, just one, you would put one down. But if some of you have twins or even triplets, we know that could be two or three, or students that are going it don't have to be twins or triplets to have multiple students in college. But if you do, still make sure to answer this question, even though it's no longer going to be taken into account, at least for the 24-25 year. Dependent students' parents' tax return information. It's going to ask them one more question that was asked compared to the students. Did the parent receive an earned income tax credit? We would need to look at the taxes to see that, to answer yes or no. So again, another important reason, even though a lot of this information hopefully can be transferred over directly from the IRS, there still are some questions where we could need to see the 22 taxes. So make sure to bring those to any appointment or FAFSA event that you go to. The amount of grant, scholarships, or benefits as income reported. Most time parents aren't going to have that and would be zero down. Foreign earned income exclusion. Again, a lot of times we're not going to see that within doing the taxes, but we want to make sure. And if it is something that is something that they had in 22, then we need to list that down, but it's not going to be directly transferred over. Once we answer these questions and hit continue, then we get into, before the asset questions, there's a question about annual child support received. If you're a parent that is receiving child support, you enter in the total amount received in child support for the last complete calendar year. The majority of you are going to be filling this form out in January, so that last complete calendar year would be 2023. So for the 2023 year, put down the amount of child support that you received for all children on the form. And then we get into your asset questions. The balance of cash savings and checking, the net worth of business and investment farm, and the net worth of investments, including real estate. Now, to give you a little bit more information, when we're talking about business and farm, there are no longer any exclusions on the 24-25 FAFSA form for small businesses or farms. So what they're looking for, if you're a small business owner or have a farm, net worth, value minus debt of that business or farm, including land, building, machineries, equipment, inventory, all of that, net worth, value minus debt. I realize sometimes that this can be, for some, it can be fairly simple, but for others, it could be a little bit harder. If you have any questions on that, obviously tonight, please ask them in the chat box. But even later on, once you start diving into the FAFSA form and actually filling it out, don't hesitate to reach out to us at ICAN for any questions you have on what to include. But we are looking for the net worth, value minus any debt to that business or investment farm, whatever it is that you have. Now, for the investment question itself, that the third question that was asked, these are investments that you would have to include. Not the home that you live in, but any other real estate, trust funds, money market accounts, mutual funds, CDs. Remember, these questions were answered to the students too. And if the students have any CDs, bonds, anything in their name, they would need to put that in their section. Down below, the last one on this investment question was 529 plans. 529 plans aren't investments you have to include, but where it's counted is on the account owner side. If you're a parent saving for your son or daughter, you're the account owner, they're the beneficiary. So you would put 529 plans on your portion of the FAFSA form that you fill out. This year on 24-25 FAFSA, you're only going to include the 529 plan of the student you're filling the FAFSA form out for, where you're an account owner. That hadn't been that way in the past, but this year it's only the student that you're filling the form out that you would need to include. Now, I do want to address that if a grandparent or an aunt or uncle, somebody else, is saving for the student in a 529 plan, they're the account owner and the student's just the beneficiary. There's nowhere on the form we have to count grandparent or aunt or uncle's assets. So those plans would not be counted on the FAFSA form. Investments you do not have to count. The two big ones are the home that you live in, your principal residence, and then retirement accounts. You do not have to count retirement accounts as an asset on this form either. In fact, this year, you're not even having to count as untaxed income your contribution into like a 401k anymore. That was a question that has been gotten rid of. Going back to the FAFSA form now, they do ask to provide the spouse's information on the form if you're married and filed a joint return. So just putting in the other spouse's information within here again and hitting continue. And now for the parents, we're on your review page. Personal identifiers, demographics, financials, and ready to sign. If you start the FAFSA form as a parent instead of the student, there will be a little more information for you to fill out. That would be in the student's information that would be over here. A little bit more information that would be included if it wasn't already filled out by the student starting it, which we're again wondering maybe that might be the best route in going. Will it help out in filling out the form? We're just not 100% sure yet. So again, with this example was the student starting it, inviting the parent, and then the parent doing their section. If that's the case, then these are the contributor sections. You just double check that information. If you need to expand them out, look them over. Click on the hyperlink if you need to go to a page to change anything. But if everything looks good, we click continue. And now the parent signature is going to take place. We're going to click on it, sign, and submit the form. And what's going to come upon submitting the student's FAFSA form, the parents is going to be presented with an abbreviated confirmation page. It'll display some information tracking the student's FAFSA and the next steps, but the student's going to get an email with full detailed confirmation eventually. The student and parent sections completed, signed. The FAFSA form is now going to be considered complete and submitted for processing. I do want to stress, again, for a FAFSA to be totally submitted, each contributor must complete their sections. And so if the student gets their FAFSA form in, let's say that there is a college that they're looking at that has a February 1 priority date. If a student submits their section on January 31st, but the parents don't end up getting their section or sections done until February 7th, the FAFSA would be totally completed on February 7th and would not have been submitted by the February 1 priority date, which could cost the student some financial aid. The best way to ensure that a student gets the most financial aid coming to them is to beat the priority date or dates of any colleges that they are looking at. So for those reasons, we want to make sure you do beat those priority dates, but that means every contributor must complete their section. Now, I wanted to mention about after you submitted in a FAFSA form, what's typically going to come back to you within a week or two is called a FAFSA submission summary, the results from the FAFSA form. I do want to warn you, though, if you're a student that fills it out here in the first couple of weeks in January, you're not going to get a FAFSA submission summary more than likely in the next week. FAFSA submission summaries are not going to start to be sent out to students, even if they complete it early on in January, until the end of January or February. In fact, any colleges that you've listed down on the FAFSA form normally would get the results within a week or two as well when you get the FAFSA submission summary. Those colleges are not going to start to get any FAFSA records from students until the end of January, February, in the beginning. So if you do it on January 1, it's still not going to get to your colleges until the end of January or February. You will have been marked down as getting it on January 1. So you will have met any priority date of a college as long as you get it in, that won't be a problem. But the colleges themselves and getting the results, it's not going to be till the end of January, February. So reason I wanted to bring that up is eventually colleges and universities are going to work up what we call financial aid offers, listing what a student qualifies for. This year, that process is definitely going to be delayed a little bit since the FAFSA started later, but also because getting the information to the colleges and universities is going to take longer than we anticipated as well. Now, with the FAFSA submission summary, it's broken up into 4 different tabs: eligibility overview, FAFSA answers, school information, next steps. We'd like to have everyone, look it over just to keep for their records, but look it over to make sure that no mistakes were made. If mistakes are made, you can make corrections. And those corrections you can start making when you get the FAFSA submission summary. But remember, you're not going to get those until at least at the end of January, February, even if you do it early. So corrections aren't going to start until then either. If you do your FAFSA on January 1 and you know right away you made a mistake after you submitted it, it's going to be end of January or February before you'll be able to make any corrections. it's going to give first section, the eligibility overview. It kind of lets you know what federal aid you might be eligible for, maybe giving a little bit of an estimate, but remember all these are estimates, and they're not guaranteed. Final determination of any student's financial aid eligibility is going to be provided by the school's financial aid office. It's going to give you an idea on what your student aid index is, the number used by the schools to determine your financial aid eligibility and build that financial aid offer, the amount of money that really the government feels you could contribute. That number could actually go down to a minus 1,500 on there instead of what used to be zero as a low. But this is what colleges will use to determine your financial aid offer. And then on the FAFSA form, answers tabs, you'll be able to see your answers. And if you need to correct any of those, you can start that make a correction process as you see on there on the link. School information, which schools that you had sent the information to, also give a little more information with them as well that you see on here, but this is what it will show you as well within the FAFSA submission summary. On the next steps tab, it lets you know, correct any errors, make sure schools have everything they need, and look out for aid-related communications from your schools. Some of you might have to go through a process called verification and provide a little bit more information to the colleges and universities that you listed. We hope with this new process that number is going to cut down, but still some of you might have to. And if you need to get any additional documentation to your school, if they request it, get that information into them as soon as you can. This also on the right side of the submission summary can choose additional resources, including aid summary or college scorecard if you want to take a look at that within the schools as well. Eventually, I don't have it listed on here, but eventually what again is going to happen is that your colleges and universities that you've applied and been accepted to and you've sent FAFSA information to will come up with a financial aid offer listing what you're able to qualify for. Because of the delay in the FAFSA starting though, as well as now a delay in getting the information to colleges and universities, we don't foresee any colleges and universities really being able to start their financial aid packaging process and getting that information out to you until middle of February at the earliest, and more than likely towards the end of February or March is when some schools will begin that process. All right, that was the information I wanted to share with you tonight going over the FAFSA form. If you have any last minute questions here as we continue on, please put them in the chat box. I do want to thank our FAFSA Step-by-Step partners, Iowa College Aid, IASFA, and then us at ICAN. That is our number and website there that you can go to set up appointments with us or ask questions. You can contact your schools directly as well, but lots of places that you can get for help along the way. And let me tell you, this is going to be a different year for all of us. Those helping with the FAFSA forms, admissions counselors that you might have already been dealing with, and financial aid folks like we have on the chat tonight. We're all anticipating really a crazy January, February, March. Let's just say spring. We're anticipating it being very crazy. There are going to be some hiccups and glitches that are going to take place within the form. It's not always going to work. So I do believe the word patience is going to come up many times for students, families, financial aid directors, us at ICAN, and we'll try to do the very best that we can in getting through this process. But one thing I would again encourage you, as I see still more questions coming in, so I want to let you know, give you time still to do that, but please check in with any colleges and universities that you're looking at, you want to put down, and find out when their priority dates are. And if some of you are looking at priority dates that might be March 1 or April 1, you may want to give it a few weeks before you fill out the FAFSA form to let some of the glitches get out of the way. Honestly, we're anticipating glitches throughout the whole year within the new system, and there could be some days better than others, but we've got a feeling this first week or two in January could be a problem. I see that there was one question about the FAFSA if it's filled out annually. And yes, I should mention this. If this is your first year, you will redo it. Every year that attends college, new student, or excuse me, uh, new school year, you do a new FAFSA with new tax information on there. So every year a student attends school, you will do that. What the 24-25 FAFSA form is for the fall of 24 and spring and summer of 25 for the majority of colleges and universities. I want to say that maybe Drake here in Iowa is the only one that uses summer as the start of a school year. So the 24-25 FAFSA form would be for the 24 summer, and then the fall of 24 and spring of 25. But almost all other colleges, I do believe it's fall of 24 and spring and summer of 25. All right, I'm just continuing to watch these questions come in. Again, I want to put out a call still. If you've got any other questions, please put them in the chat box. And I see one question that has come up that I do want to address, and that is sometimes families will ask, I've heard we're not going to qualify for anything, or do I have to do the FAFSA because I heard I'm not going to qualify for anything? I want to say technically the answer at first would be no, you wouldn't have to if you're planning on just writing the check and paying for school altogether. Now, the reasons that ICAN know that we'd like to see every family, at least the first year in filling out the FAFSA form for a student, would be one, you never know what you might qualify for. We've heard from enough families who didn't think they were, that they ended up qualifying either federal or state aid. And so that would be one reason, because it's not only federal aid, but some state of Iowa aid is determined by this as well, including the Iowa tuition grant for students looking at a private schools here in the state of Iowa, like one of our chat monitors tonight from Grinnell. That would be one example. Another example of state of Iowa aid would be the Last Dollar Scholarship for students going to an Iowa community college, getting into a high demand career field there that falls under that. You need to have the FAFSA form on file to see if you qualify for that. So I would highly encourage every family to do it. Another reason I like to put out there as well is because some colleges, even to give their institutional money, may require the FAFSA form too. Institutional money that honestly can be given no matter what this form says, like merit-based awards, academics, athletics, artistic ability. Even though that aid can be given no matter what this form says, not every college will do this, but even though that can be given, some colleges, just to make sure that families are exhausting all options, they'll want that FAFSA form on file. So that would be the one thing that I would just suggest to every family to make sure to do. No matter how big a pain the 24-25 form might be to you this year, I would still highly encourage you to go and to do that. Still seeing some questions that are coming up into the chat box right now. Want to give some time before we end the webinar today to have all those questions answered. I see one question that was answered about an asset, or asked about an asset, that I wouldn't mind addressing here as well. It was about CDs. If they were cashed out earlier this year, I believe there would be some tax ramifications for 23 then is on that. But you would only actually put in the CDs or any investments and what their amount is as of the day you're filling out the form. So that's what you would list down. If you don't fill out the form for some reason until next April, it would be however many assets that you have on that date in April and what they would be worth then as well. So I believe that was the question that was being asked. Those if they've already been cashed in, you would not claim them on that. If the cash would be in checking and savings right now, that's a question that's already on the form. But if you've already used it for another expense, that's not something that you need to put down for an asset then, if they've already been cashed out. Just checking to see if there's any other last minute questions. I want to put a final call out for any questions that you might have. Looks like we got a lot of activity that was on there, so put out a last call there. All right, I believe we're going to go ahead and how do we contact if a question arises later? Down below there at our website or our phone number right there, 877-272-4692. That is our information at ICAN, so please don't hesitate. I will tell you that starting tonight, so tomorrow, we are on winter break from now and reopening on January 3rd. So if a question arises later, I would say contact us starting on January 3rd and moving on. I know we are very booked full appointments and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But don't hesitate to contact us at ICAN, or also contact your admissions or financial aid offices at the colleges that you're going to too. I know some of them are going to be starting a winter break here for a week or a week and a half or so over the holidays, but don't hesitate to contact them either if you have some questions too. A lot of places you can get for help as you go along the way, but that website and number down below on this screen at icansucceed.org and our number, that is also where you can get a hold of us to set up an appointment or again, get questions answered as you mentioned too. All right, I am going to go ahead and end the webinar now. Thank you all for taking out the time before the holidays here and joining us, whether you're watching it live on December 20th or you're watching the recording as well. Let us know if any questions arise. I want to thank all of our IASPA financial aid experts too, Tim, Sarah, Andrew, Mary, Kylie, and Matt. Thank you very much for being a part of this. I appreciate it. And I am going to go ahead and end the webinar now. Hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and might be seeing some of you after the new year and helping with FAFSA appointments. Thank you very much.